Welcome to SkirtWork. Hi, I'm Manda Milling.
And I'm Lisa Johnson.
And this is our little podcast about, well, a lot of different things. Women in work.
Women.
Working. What is, and the irony of the title is that SkirtWork's no such thing. So we decided to call our podcast, which is a thing, SkirtWork.
And also, we want to talk about what makes us angry and what we're passionate about. And yeah,
and I
what's happening in the world.
Not everything makes us angry.
No.
Yes. But Lisa, just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand, very small town where everybody knew each other. I graduated the University of Canterbury in 1992 with what my aunt referred to as a bugger all degree. And I managed to enter the workforce in the middle of a very nasty recession. So I think we've got some long memories of that sort of thing. I moved to Australia in 2000 and I've worked with you pretty much since then.
Yes.
Bar some maternity leave.
Yes, about 24 years it is now. That's right.
And we've grown much wiser in that time.
Yes,
Amanda,
absolutely.
Would you like to tell everybody?
My galaxy's even further away than yours, Lisa. So I'm 10 years older than Lisa, and I was born in central western New South Wales in a place called Dubbo. And whilst it's probably bigger than Westport, it is, hub of the West. So it's sort of halfway between Sydney and Melbourne. What am I saying? Halfway between Melbourne and Brisbane, and so wonderful place to grow up. But I've been in Sydney a very long time. Live in the northern suburbs of Sydney. Graduated with a Bachelor of Business and in accounting and business law, which I thought I would never ever do again when I joined recruitment, and now I seem to do a lot of accounting and business law because I'm company secretary for People to People, and a group of companies that I help co-found, which are sort of doing extremely well without my involvement, which is great. And so that's pretty much it, I've been a working mother, although my son's off my hands now, but I'm still a working mother. And essentially that's a little bit about my background. So we're both country girls.
Yeah, we are.
From different countries, but both country girls. There's a lot actually that in this business that originated in the country. Maybe that's what binds a few of us together.
Well, I think if we were going to use gross generalisation, people that grow up in the country are very resilient.
Yes, Amanda. Well, that is exactly right. And I find it interesting that I have a city kid and you've got city kids. And so there's a little bit of the wake up to yourself and back in my day and you're so lucky and that kind of thing, which elicits an eye roll. Well, I don't know about in your family.
What's interesting with my two oldest ones is neither of them are interested in driving.
Oh, that's it.
Because they live in a city where they can use public transport. And they're like, what? Don't want to learn how to drive.
Whereas it was a race to get the driver's license where I grew up because otherwise you just didn't have a social life.
Well, I have to admit, I didn't get my driver's license until I was well an adult because my dad, whom I love dearly, said women shouldn't be on the road.
Right.
And he refused to teach me. And my mother didn't drive.
Interesting. So the opposite of that is my father made sure I got mine. So I went and did all the errands. And so, even he was a stock and station agent. And so I'm an agent, but I used to recruit accountants. And so he would, sheep and cattle and that kind of thing in the country. And so, of course, there are vast distances to cover. And we always had, the work car was the ute. So as soon as I could, he made sure that I was in that ute and I was going off and doing things. So unpaid labour. So I've tried to explain to my son there's nothing wrong with unpaid labour.
Well, they owe us, right?
No, that's exactly right. So isn't that interesting? So we were both exploited, but in completely different ways.
That's exactly right.
Excellent.
Exactly right. Now, one of the things that we're going to do every week, Amanda, is we're going to look at the results of a poll that People to People do on X, formerly known as Twitter, every week. And do you want to introduce what last week?
Yes, well, I'm going to read from the page, Lisa, if you do bear with me. So the latest is, to what extent do you feel your workplace is committed to diversity and inclusion? Now, this is pushed out from an Australian and New Zealand market, but then, of course, it's on the interwebs, so basically anybody can access that. And the results of the poll were, Lisa, very committed to diversity and inclusion was 25.8%, somewhat committed, 29.2%, and not committed at all, 45%. So that opens a lot of questions. You want to kick it off?
So many questions from this one. Now, Manda and I, we were talking about this before we've come on air to try and work out why people would have voted the way that they've voted. And we've come to the conclusion we really don't know. Like, we don't know in terms of what element of the society they felt were being excluded, because diversity covers sex, gender, ethnicity, religion, disabilities. What have I missed? Sexuality.
And age.
Right
down the bottom of the list. That's
always
right.
Always at the bottom of the list. And in fact, that's where Manda and I want to take this discussion today. So we're going to leave everything else to the side and we're going to talk about age discrimination in the workforce. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about when I started in recruitment in the dark ages. Back in New Zealand, I worked for this amazing woman. Her name was Joyce Just. And she was a powerhouse in the Wellington market in recruitment. She was amazing. And I started out as an administrator and then became a temp consultant. And she used to say to me, Lisa, when you're looking at the resumes, if that person is clearly 40 years or older, you need to put it to the side. They're too old. And so that's what we did. 40 was a long time.
That's a long way in my rear view vision mirror, let me tell you, Lisa. That's a long way away. Well, it's interesting because we had so many euphemisms, but, essentially a job title would mean there would be an implicit visual of what that person would be. So if I just pluck one out of the air, then accounts payable clerk was young, blue-eyed, blonde-haired and female. And then it was so interesting the way that manifested. So when putting a date of birth on a resume became optional, boy, did they disappear quick smart. And I'll tell you a story. Is when I always did accounting recruitment, and then when we set up people to people, I had started doing a bit of business support recruitment, which is what we call everything administrative. So it can be anything really at that time other than accounting. So covered a myriad of it. But most of it was what is called pink collar work. So predominantly female oriented because it was secretarial, personal assistants, executive assistants. And so one of the reasons is that I decided to stay with it, because I had done that when I'd come back from maternity leave, is the fact that I had a few of these. And it was really to my advantage because I was around the same age. I looked quite similar to the women that I was interviewing because, look, rightly or wrongly, and it doesn't matter, if you're this is ageism in the reverse. If you've got someone that looks very wet behind the ears and they're very young in age and they're interviewing you and you've had 15, 25, 30, there is just not a lot of relatability on either side of the desk, to be honest. So what I found is that, look, I'm a business person. Goodness me, I'm going to use whatever I can to my advantage. And so I found I could have some, if you like, and at times you have to have difficult conversations with your candidates or your job applicants about all sorts of different things. And a hard thing is, gosh, heaven forbid, someone's got BO or they're just dressed completely inappropriately. And sometimes it can be useful when you kind of look and sound and the same as the other person on the other side of the desk. So that really helped me. And because up to that point, a lot of business support recruitment consultants were young, very pretty, and that would completely alienate. And so quite often, this is before video interviews, and so when the women would come in for their interviews, I'd call them in. You could see a little bit of this barrier, and then through a bit of conversation, they looked at me and it kind of melted away a little bit.
But it wasn't just your candidates, Manda, because the people that were doing the recruitment were quite often women of a certain age as well, and you could relate to them. But
if they were men and they were recruiting these roles, they knew I wasn't going to put up with any rot either. So they knew that,
Well,
in fact, you would be asked, how old are they? And I said, I would have absolutely no idea. And we still get asked that to this very day.
Yeah. Look, and we still
Unbelievable.
and we still see discrimination against women at a younger age too. I mean, I've heard consultants get off the phone and say the client isn't willing to interview this girl because she recently got married and obviously is going to go off and have a baby. And so, you know, discrimination's happening all over the shop. But I think that there's an element that happens, and it's not, I'm not talking about recruitment per se, but about the workforce where people go, well, she's older, so she's not going to have the computer skills.
Oh, look, I mean, really, it's 2024. So, look, in the 90s, when I really was probably doing the most of my recruitment, there was an element that you would have to ask on all of the job descriptions, computer skills. I mean, it's such a redundant question these days because anybody that's been in the workforce for an element of time obviously has them. So we're going back 30 years. So the people that are, you know, in their 50s and 60s, if they're applying now, they have been using computers for that period of time. So, but fortunately, hopefully, the people that are on the other doing the recruiting, the line managers that are recruiting these people are understanding. Look, plenty of times a resume would come across and I would look at something and some in the office and I'd work out they're probably around the same age as me, even though they would be cagey about dates and things. And they said, and I'd hear a comment, oh, older style. That was the comment in the office. And I'd sit up and I'd say, what do you mean older style? I said, I've looked at this and I think they're around the same age. Oh, yes, but Manda, you're different. How do you know I'm different? If I sent you my resume and you saw all of that, you would say, oh, well, she's older style.
Do you think that people assume that older women are intolerant? Like, you think of the rise of the Karen.
Oh, I hate that expression as well because
so appalling.
So what? I don't know.
So
what's the male equivalent of that? Plenty of them out there.
Exactly. And so
Kevin's?
Does that mean that
I don't know.
It just gives people permission that if you object to something, you're a Karen. Like if you object to bad behaviour, look at that Karen.
It's like the boomer thing, which I am not, even though people, you know, because they keep switching that date of birth around a bit. But it's a catch-all for everything. We've in furious agreement today, Lisa. It's amazing, this subject. Because when I looked at that, the question about diversity, people go to relate it to their own experiences. So, you know, if I asked a lot of, if you like, the younger or my son's group of friends or the younger set here, I'd say, what do you mean by that? And they'd probably talk about gender. They'd probably talk about sexuality. And I'd say, well, what else? And they'd say ethnicity. Right. What else? Then they'd probably move on to, they'd probably have a bit of a think. And what about age? And so, you know, and because you can be discriminated against quite often at the beginning. Now, look, I'm looking at superannuation a lot because of the age I am now and the more of my career is behind me than in front of me. And obviously, we obviously have had quite a big skills shortage in this country, particularly on the back of COVID and the whole thing. And so quite often you'll read a lot of financial advice encouraging you to keep working. Now, I don't feel, well, as I keep saying, what on earth would I do if I didn't work? And I think my family have said, please, we don't want you home any more than you are. So please keep working. But there's a lot of people, and I know men and women, that have had very, very busy lives in their professional lives. Yes, you work your family around it, and then all of a sudden just to stop that overnight is almost like a little bit of a mourning people can go through.
Oh,
you know, because structure and purpose, you need purpose to get up in the morning. So if you've built that up, your interests up to such a point, and then you then replace one with the other. And I've seen people do that, you know, whether it be school organisations or their tennis club or what, you know, they're using their skills in a voluntary capacity. That's terrific, big tick. But if you've never really cultivate interests at that sort of thing outside, the day you want to stop, there's nothing. And it can be, that's when you hear about people in depressions and they're really lost and they're very capable. And so how many times do you see where they may retire? I read one the other day, a woman who was a nurse in WA, and she, after 18 months, she's gone back to part-time nursing. She missed it. She missed the social collaboration, but I think she just missed the purpose getting up the morning. Now, didn't want to work 5 days a week, but really happy to get in there. And quite often it goes beyond money. Now, I know there's people that have got to continue working to supplement superannuation, or particularly as we've come off the back of zero interest rates and they're wanting to continue whilst they're still capable and able. But also a lot of it is to do with interest and being able to make a contribution.
And just keeping your brain working.
Oh, yes. Well,
you can only
daily
Netflix.
Wordle's not enough.
Yeah, you can only Netflix and chill for so long, right?
100%.
But, I read this really interesting article, and it would have been in the ABC News or possibly Sydney Morning Herald, but it was about AI and how it's the biggest disruptor that's coming our way. The telephone was a huge social disruptor. The internet was a disruptor, and AI will be a disruptor. And I recently attended a
printing
conference.
Was way back century when the printing press was invented.
Exactly right.
No, I was not around for that. I just like to add.
We're
a little bit. A couple of centuries after that. Yes.
But what was interesting, and I recently went on a Salesforce conference, and they had the same messaging. And AI will threaten a lot of jobs because you'll be able to automate an awful lot. Now, interestingly, the jobs that you can't automate are the ones that we take for granted. Your Uber driver, your delivery cyclist,
your gig worker.
They're not going to get replaced by AI. So hopefully in the future that means they have get better money. But what will happen, or what the prediction is that people will not be rewarded for data entry. They're not going to get remunerated for that. It's going to be about creativity. It's going to be about innovation. It's going to be about ideas and collaboration and the stuff that AI really can't do. Like, we can't automate it. But as a result, people will work for longer. So they may not work 5 days a week anymore. It may be a shortened week, but people will work for longer because your brain, as long as your brain's still functioning and you're still creative and you still feel like you've got something to add value to, then you'll be able to. Whereas now it does feel like you're here at a certain age and people are talking, well, you'll be retiring soon. Well, you'll be put on the shelf.
Well, that move too is going to alienate a lot of people because not everyone, as we always say, has the benefit of what we do of working in an office, using our, using those intellectual capabilities, meaning that, they might be on the production line. They're in a warehouse. I mean, obviously they're using their brain and, it's quite complicated work about where things, but the areas that they're talking about that are going to be automated, and that would scare a lot of people. And is that going to, not everyone's creative. I don't think I'm particularly creative, but, I can do my job. But that's sort of how that is going to apply to jobs that don't actually require that skill set.
I think that there'll just be new jobs. There'll be different things. That, society
but where at
will
least
be
is transitioning the people that are currently doing that job now. That's the big challenge, isn't it? The transition. How do they transition?
Well, I think that we'll have to wait and see. I think it's an opportunity and it's terrifying at the same time. Like, you can't help thinking back to the movies of our youth, Manda, and thinking Arnold Schwarzenegger's going to pop up one day and say humanity's doomed, or that, anyone, like war games, like, all the movies that were brought out in the 80s to, basically they were anti-Cold War movies.
Yes.
But it's the same kind of logic. We've always had this fear of technology, and I think the genie's out of the bag.
Well, I know over many years, and you've seen it, particularly we've both been in recruitment such a long time now, is that there would always be some bright new thing that would come up to say it's going to replace the recruitment consultant. Now, sure, we've got technology that can help pass resumes and look for keywords, particularly when you're doing a lot of bulk recruitment. But, it's still this.
Yeah.
It's still one person talking to another person.
But see, I think that's where AI is beneficial.
Yes.
Because if there's a lot of administrative work, so if we took the recruitment industry as an example, there's an awful lot of administrative work that's there. You know, there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of processes. If you can automate a lot of that, then those people are freed up for relationships.
That's right.
They can't hide behind the administration anymore. They have to go out and go, I'm here because I like people. I'm interested in my candidates. I'm interested in my clients.
And you can't hide behind the admin.
That's exactly
right. Which poor performing recruitment consultants always do, and they always have. That is a fact.
But those people who are they've got those relationship skills and are terrible at admin, no worries.
No worries. And look, we don't employ them for the admin, but when people try to... Anyway, that's a whole other... Yeah, that can be a disaster. But once again, this is someone watching this thinking, well, I pick and pack in a production line, I'm in a warehouse, because goods still have to be moved. That's we did find during COVID, when everything that was, if you like, white collar shut down, is that our supply chain and ops just took off because people still needed goods. Physically, they needed goods. People are still going to have, not everything is going to be virtual. So there has to be people. Now, of course, that can be automated. Now, mistakes can be made. And you're right, there are going to be different types of work. So that, I think, would need to be explained a lot more clearly, how that's going to work, if you're going to automate all of that. And there's been a lot of automation in car production, but then we don't even do that in this country anymore, in Australia. So how that's going to work, and I can understand how people always can be afraid of change if you're not in the the box seat to take it forward. So how that actually, but you're right, we don't manufacture cars from the ground up here anymore. There's tinkering bits and pieces. And so how that then has to be, how you adjust to all of that, really. So getting back to people are going to have to adjust, I'd like people to be able to adjust, just to segue back, to understanding that a diversity in your workforce isn't just the fact that someone's a male or a female, or someone identifies as a male or a female, or somebody, who people to choose to marry, and that sort of, it actually goes a lot further.
Yeah.
So obviously we were saying that it started with gender, and yes, we've got various agencies to look after the gender pay gaps and quotas and all that sort of thing. And then it moves to the next stage to say, well, you've got religious diversity, and then once again, right down the end, you've got age. And so that, as I try to point out, look, predominantly it's a point of view against people that have got a few runs on the board. But the other side of it is too, and that our generation, if you want, just because somebody's young doesn't mean they're not capable. They also think quite differently. And look, for since Adam and Eve, we've had intergenerational clashes, haven't we? Well, I wouldn't have done it that way back then. And then the young ones, well, I wouldn't do it that way either. This is the way I would do it. So, but that's been going on since forever.
Yeah.
Time immemorial. So, and it does make life interesting. There's no doubt about it.
I enjoy it. I enjoy hearing. I mean, I do roll my eyes a lot, actually.
Yes.
But
then again, we have a lot of mutual eye rolling in our household. And they probably do it in the office, but they don't show us their eye rolling.
No, they turn away from us.
Yes, that's right.
She's a Karen. But, I think about my daughter, because she's a millennial. Is she a millennial? No, she's Gen Z. No. She's 22. What is she? She's Gen Z. She's Gen Z. She's a child. She's a baby. And the thing that strikes me about her is that she's far smarter than the kids were when I was 22. Like, more worldly, more angry, more aware. Like, just so different to how we grew up. I think, we talk about the olden days, and we were allowed to run out in the street, and we weren't coddled and driven to school every day, but we still lived in a world that appeared to be much safer.
But then it appeared on the surface, I think. I quite often say, were the good old days good? So so it was interesting. It just brought to mind Mad Men the other day, and which we loved. But I always say to my mum, have a look at this, because she was born in the 30s, so she was a young mum in the early 60s, and she said, I can't watch it. And I said, what? It's fantastic, because she sat through The Sopranos. I don't want you to think we're talking about someone that's precious here. She thought that was majestic. And she said, I lived through that. I just don't want to watch it again. And I thought, as gorgeous as Don Draper or John Hamm, boy, oh boy, that was tough. Ask Peggy. So for anyone that's watching. But I thought that was such an interesting point of view. She said, look, I have lived through that. I don't. And you know what? When you look back, and I was thinking, yeah, look, classic was going for interviews in the 80s for different things. And I used to wear a ring on my ring finger, which is the wedding ring finger, just because it fitted. And I didn't really have any superstitions or anything of that nature. But I did take it off for interviews, because if I didn't, it would be zeroed in. I had a couple of experiences, and of course there's just all of these ideas that, oh, well, she's obviously married, she's engaged, and she's got, all that kind of thing. So, look, we have moved on from that. Even if there's some subliminal stuff, it is not quite as, well, certainly not as overt as that, that's for sure. I tell my son that particular story, and he just said, but it's not something you would ever need to think about.
I think one of the interesting things when we talk about boomers, and you're right, they get a lot of criticism, is that people forget that the women, those are the women that fought for women's rights. They were the ones out there, protesting.
Female Union came out in 1970. Am I correct in that? Someone's going to correct me, but I'm pretty sure it was 1970.
And so they were really talking. That's when we started talking about gender pay. That's when you think about, it was the early 70s when these women were really active.
Also because there was no such thing as no fault divorce in our country here in Australia. So there were women's refuges, so women could escape if. It didn't happen. It's not as if it was pervasive that it happened in 100% of cases. Of course it didn't. But it gave a refuge for people that. But you're right, they're the ones, and I could see where some of those women now who are in 70s and 80s saying, "Hang on a minute, look at what we did for you. I lost some really good bras because of this."
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, they were trying to navigate their lives in a time where once you got married, you weren't allowed to work anymore.
Oh, well, look, you also had, well, look, I can tell you now, if you wanted to be a flight attendant, which it wasn't called back in those days, I think it was air hostess. As soon as you were pregnant, that was it.
You're gone.
You're gone.
Never coming back.
No. But then, but a lot of women accepted that too. Not purely because they thought, well, I'm not going to have any childcare. How am I going to get there anyway? It's just been banging on about this for such a long time. Look, so the good old days weren't that good.
No.
And so when I hear people say, back in the day, I think, well, yeah, I was probably, I was certainly a bit younger, but geez, I don't know whether I'd really swap a few of those things to what today. And the young men and women of today, again, when they're our age, look back and think, I don't know whether it was that great in this area, because things will have moved on even more.
I think and I was reflecting on this morning, that when I look back to when I first joined the workforce, you just accepted a certain amount of misogyny. It was just accepted, and you let it sort of wash over you, because it didn't even occur to you to say that's not very good. Because it was just an accepted thing. Whereas now I think young women are more likely to turn around and go, you can't talk to me like that.
But then on the other side of that, I think, as I've discussed with you previously, I think that pendulum has swung way, way, way the other side. It'll come back to the centre. It needed to swing. I absolutely agree with that. But having to mind that you're piecing it to such an extent that, no, I'm not going to use the term, it's all woke. I'm not going to do it.
But you used it.
No.
You did.
But swung, I don't know what it really means anyway, to be honest. But look, to such an extent where you are so restricted in absolutely everything, I don't think that's right either. I think you've got to have, where's the structure there, but the pendulum swing back, but I guess it's like any change. You've got your extremists that will want to take it to such an extent. And yes, we need extremists,
Well,
destructive ones. Well, we need some. But then I think they've done that. Okay, off you go. And then you could just come back to the middle of it because, I know I say some things, and then someone said, you can't say that. I said, well, what is wrong with that?
Well,
can't I just say, look, my brother was saying to me the other day, you can't say blackout. I said, what? When the power goes off, I can't say blackout. He said, no, you've got to say outage. I said, oh, for heaven's sake.
Well, I have to admit, I haven't heard that one.
Yes, so he said, you can't do that. And I said, it's got nothing to do with someone's skin colour. It's just, anyway.
I think that we could probably both agree that that's a bit stupid.
Yeah.
But to me, woke means kindness. It's just being mindful that when you're talking to or about different people, that we're just mindful to be kind. It's not that you can't say that, this table's white or it's this microphone's black. It's not that. It's just that we should be mindful and kind. And I worry about extremism. For a long time, I didn't think there was left extremism, Amanda. I thought that was just kind people.
There's plenty of it.
But there is a level of stupidity there, and I'm 100% willing to accept that. But I do worry about right wing. Like the extremists.
One's not better than the other, I don't believe. I think fascism and communism, quite honestly.
Oh, I quite like communism.
Oh, right, okay. We're definitely going to disagree on that one.
Well, probably not communism, to be honest. But I don't mind a few socialist principles. Let's just say that. I think communism doesn't
free
work.
Free markets, individual responsibility. But there you go.
But okay, we're going to have an interesting discussion on individual responsibility next week. I can feel that one coming.
But look, I think the thing is, though, coming back to this poll, is that it doesn't really, if you like, detail the actual areas that people were considering. But I think the people that answered that were thinking, well, most people think of themselves first, their own personal circumstances. That's what they've got the most experience with. I would often wonder, I would like to have a breakdown of, and of course we don't because they're just a straw poll, but a breakdown of the people that answered and what they considered to be discriminatory or that there wasn't an observation of. So because you and I will merrily go along in the office and we'll think we've got, if you like, that minority or this, that, or what, and all that kind of thing, and that's a majority, and that's what, and we think we're doing a great job. Someone will pull us up and say, no, you're not diverse at all. So so you'd think, oh, I thought we were actually doing okay. But I think what has been quite an education is in our candidate base. And so as over the years where we would have people quite blatantly on the ethnicity side of things saying, I do not want somebody from a certain country or certain background. And absolutely blatantly. And I'd just say, well, and I didn't have a clue.
And the flip side is that we had plenty of candidates that started to use anglicised names because they weren't getting interviews because they had a name that was common in different countries. So there definitely has been discrimination in the past, and I think there continues to be discrimination. I think there's been great strides made in certain areas, and I think the focus will turn towards age because we're an ageing workforce.
That's right,
Amanda.
Exactly right. And, everybody is living a bit longer. And the other thing I will say that has helped that acceptance of people from different, let's talk about different ethnic backgrounds, if you want to use that term, is the fact that people doing the recruiting are from those backgrounds.
Yeah.
So when back in the 90s, it was a very new workforce really kicking off with migration. I know that came in from the 70s and the 80s, but I really saw a lot of it there in the 90s. And so then predominantly the people that were doing the interviewing, well, probably didn't even look like us. So probably, no, they're men and women, but that look like us. But then now you'll find that is a real mix. I mean, goodness sake, we even had people knocking people back that had gone and done the big UK trip, been on overseas and then come back, which now say, well, why haven't they done their big UK trip? Why have they still continued working? Oh, they're a bit flighty. So, it's all gone now because all the people doing the recruiting have, if they've done their university, they've gone and done a big holiday, working holiday, gone away, come back, and then want to knuckle down and
Well, I think we
career.
accept.
And now it's and now it's, if you haven't done that, why haven't they done that, or when are they planning on doing it? So I've seen that go full circle, which has been really interesting and entertaining actually to see.
I just would like sort of one last word about the diversity, and we've talked about age. I think that there is a group that is even more challenged than what us old women are, and that's people with disabilities.
Exactly.
Because there's an awful lot of workplaces that are just not set up. They can't physically cater for people with disabilities. I think that needs to be addressed in the future. I think the flexible working arrangements opens opportunities for people with disabilities, but employers have to be willing to embrace it.
Well, the argument is, I believe within principle, but it would never work in our environment, which is exactly the line that was used in Yes, Prime Minister in the 1970s when they were trying to hire, which is one of my favourite episodes, trying to hire a woman, and all the men are sitting around and say, oh, yes, I agree with it in principle, it would never work in my department. And when finally Jim Hacker, the Prime Minister, offers her the job, she said, oh, no, I've taken a job with an investment bank. Well, I try to do everything for them and nothing's going to... It's a really, gosh, it stands the test of time, that show. But look, very, very good mate of mine is very big. He's was born profoundly deaf, and we have quite a number of interests in common. Good mate. And so whenever there's a big meeting or a conference or whatever, he's always the one that gets the subtitles, and not just for him, for elderly people that have difficulty hearing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you've got somebody that has got that experience, and that he's got a cochlear implant now, but was born profoundly deaf, how it would never even cross somebody's mind setting up a conference to have the subtitles unless you had somebody that had that experience say, hey, by the way, this is what we need.
Yeah.
And so, shock horror. But he said it's not just for people with disability. You've got elderly people that that want to participate, but sometimes feel they don't want to because they can't hear, and they want to ask a question, and of course they haven't heard properly, so they feel a bit inhibited in doing it. So that taught me a lot, and we talk about that quite a bit actually, and it's really quite fascinating. And he's had a very illustrious, his corporate career, and but heavily involved in that. You know who you are. So I'll get him to watch this. But anyway, so look, I find that is, the wheels crunch slowly, but it is, it's like anything. There's no point saying, well, back when I was 20 or back when I was 30, because life doesn't work that way. You can't turn back the clock. And I just say to people that might think, particularly some of the younger ones that think I'll never be their age. Well, I bloody well hope they are.
Yeah.
Because we've got a few friends between us, Lisa, that would dearly, when I hear somebody complaining about a milestone birthday, I just say, well, we've attended the funerals of friends who would actually love to be that age. So embrace every single year. And yes, you might slow up a little bit. And sometimes, as my husband says, you always make a noise when you get up off the lounge. There's always a creak and a groan. But hey, I'd rather that than the alternative.
Exactly.
And I think on that happy note,
it's time
to say goodbye this week.
And do our real jobs.
And we'll finish by saying it's okay to agree to disagree. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
And, of course, if you would like to listen to the SkirtWork podcast, you can find us anywhere where you get your podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube, heaven forbid. Lisa and I would much prefer this to be audio, but no, we're being videoed as well. So please subscribe, send us a comment. We would love to hear from you.